Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Story number 1. The Grenadier, written by Rusty the Banite. Max's eye glowed with delight as it took in all the walls of weapons, and so few were recognizable. Human Jamison, what is this? He picked up a long, slender stick. His guide grinned at him, but Hayak's excitement was too strong to cringe in fear, as he had wanted to so many times over the past 3 hours. That is a Wayfarer Model 2200 bolt-action hunting rifle. It's got a range of 1,900 yards and fires 7.62 by 51mm NATO rounds at 5,000 yards a second. I didn't understand a single word of what you just said, and I love it. Hank laughed at that. Apparently it was supposed to be a friendly sound, so Hayek attempted to imitate him. A grating sound emerged instead, causing Hank to pause and purse his lips. Maybe just be, yourself, you don't have to try and to laugh. Please? I understand, Human Jamison, he acknowledged, moving on to the next question. But what exactly does this thing do? I suppose it could work as a club in an emergency. Hank raised an eyebrow. You really don't understand a word that I just said, he commented quietly, but Hayek politely ignored the faux pas. It's a gun. I do not know what a gun is, Hayek said. Hank blinked slowly at him. But, you have projectile weapons. No, Hayek said. We use the Inchungsang, as our ground troops need a ranged option. Those, weird giant seagull chickens, Hank responded. What do? Aggravate the enemy to death. They expel their stomach acids onto their prey. We tamed them centuries ago for transport and combat. Hank's eyes went wide. Oh, okay, he commented. That's, kind of cool. But if you can't take anything down without them, then how will you protect your hulls of your spaceships? A plate of armor. Sounds, expensive. Oh, prohibitively so. Why do you think only the most road-trusted and skilled warriors are seen in the larger galactic community? But, generally speaking, few races even need ground combat at this point. It is the same for you, yes? I take it the chicken of the sea is more of a status symbol at this point. Indeed. After 10 minutes or so of browsing and asking questions of each other, Hayek reached the most baffling item in his collection. Okay, I have to ask, he asked, rotating his topmost segment in amusement. All of these fancy tools, and you still use rocks? Hank was offended. Rocks! I'll have you know that these are variable payload remote detonation grenades! Perettis for short. They have a blast radius of 20 feet and switch between fragmentation, flashbang, smoke napalm, and HMX with the press of a button. And you can even queue up a combo effects if you really want to feck up somebody's day. This time, Hayek actually felt some concern. Human Jamison, that would kill you as well. Nothing can outrun an explosion. Hank paused, then turned to stare at him wide-eyed comprehension. That's why you weren't understanding guns, he shouted in delight. Hayek, have you ever heard of throwing? The Gintz game? Only if your shoulder joint is absolute crap, which, granted, you guys don't have much of one. Maybe I should have seen this coming. Anyway, come with me. I want to show you something. Hayek rustled his pseudopods in a mystified defeat and let the human drag him onto the external field that he called the range, briefly admiring the external saturated blue atmosphere of Earth. He nonetheless brought himself back to Hank's demonstration, just in time to see him bend his arm backward at an entirely unnatural distance and whip the rock forward. The grenade sailed through the air, landing at an impossible distance away, and exploded into a combination of heat, light, and shrapnel. And as fascinating as the effect was, Hayek found that he could not care less. Human Jamison, your arm! He shouted in horror. Hank just grinned cheerfully as he spun his arm in multiple complete circles. Yep, human throwing is the real deal. Nonsense, we have to get you to the hospital immediately. Dude, Hayek, I'm fine. You can jack for yourself. I'm no medical professional, to be sure, but your arm broke off entirely. I really didn't, Hank shrugged. Do not move that arm. The outer shell is the only thing keeping your organs inside. The quick trip to the nearest hospital and a lecture on human anatomy by an extremely amused staff later. Hayax was shriveled up in shame and embarrassment. No. End of story. Story number 2. Napalm doesn't stick to kids. Written by Storm the Castle. Thruss stared in horrified awe at the statement printed on the side of the captain's wall, viewable from any position in the command room from which many day-to-day operations were run. It was painted there, had been for years, though he only noticed what it was actually said, as though they were proud of this knowledge, this barbaric realization. It horrified Thruss. This, a Chitian for whom community, and especially the young, were the most precious things in the world. Thruss felt a warmth behind him as he knew to be the captain by its level of radiation and heat, and unpromptly spoke to him. He sensed through what the humans called intuition that he was being regarded strangely by the captain. "Captain," said Thruss. "Yeah, bud." "This statement, it is horrifying in its implications, as well as the categorically untrue. Please explain." Thruss had learned over the year that he'd been assigned that requests posed as polite questions were more likely to receive an answer than ones that didn't sound as though they had an option to not answer. "Which one?" he asked, but the confusion was only brief. That one. What do you want to know?" "Why? Is it written here? Is it some sort of reminder?" Thruss had a pit in his lower stomach at the thought of the species that had to be reminded not to use incendiary devices on their own young. It is, but not in the manner that you might be thinking." Thruss gently sighed at the reassurance, then prepared himself for an explanation. Previously, Thruss had never enjoyed his scheduled instructionals, even those in his career which he did enjoy. But the captain made such things quite lovely. He had a deep voice, even by human standards, and a sort of growling timbre impossible for the Chitian that moved through those he spoke to. It sounded like rocks being rubbed against each other, and it pleased Thruss every time he spoke. He even made recordings, albeit secretly, and intended to share them with a few thousand children. "The reminder isn't about the napalm, but more about what it represents. You see, some people get so excited about using things that they maybe don't think about the consequences. That is never more important to remember than when using something that you are unfamiliar with." The captain, deep-skinned with a slightly bulbous belly, leaned back into his plush chair, though never broke eye contact with Thruss as he spoke. "When napalm was new, a lot of folks didn't understand what made it different from other incendiaries. They used it because it was new and fancy, and learned the hard way why it was a last resort sort of item. Napalm doesn't stick to kids is a deliberate oxymoron. It forces you to think about it, forces you to realize that it is untrue, and it is a reminder to everyone on the ship that no one is authorized to mess with anything that can't identify by name and origin." The captain leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and asked, "Anything that you don't get about that, Thruss?" Not particularly, Captain." Thruss felt it was a good thing to have, especially for a species like humans who tended to play with dangerous particles for fun as much as they did. "Though, I shudder to think about how the knowledge was come across. You humans did not meet other species until recently, meaning you only learned about napalm by using it on, each other." "Ah, that," the captain nodded knowingly. "There is a reason for that, as well, though. Tell me, Thruss, what is the biggest difference between you Chitians and we humans, not including the obvious physical traits?" This one is easy. "I believe our mentality, Captain. The Chitian do not believe in violence is a viable answer to the vast majority of situations. You humans, I have come to understand, feel differently." The captain chuckled. Yeah, you're right again, Thruss. My pa used to say if violence ain't solved your problems, you haven't used enough of it yet. Though, it is a bit more than just mentality. It's more about how we view things. You Chitians live, eat and breathe, forgive and forget. But for a human, if you get us angry enough, we may just come to the conclusion that you'd be in danger to the future family and species. His lean changed, subtly to most, but Thrust suddenly had danger alarms going off in his mind. "Get us angry enough," he continued, voice darker than Thrust had heard it in a long time, "and we may well just come to the conclusion that you need to be removed from the gene pool, as does everyone responsible for putting you into it, and anyone you may have already come to add to it. They may just be unilaterally decide that the culture responsible for making you, the laws that didn't restrain you, and the people that you represent are not worth keeping around. And then we'll put on a huge amount of effort into correcting that issue. We'll wipe out 2 or 3 generations just to make sure someone as offensive as you doesn't crop up again." His eyes narrowed hard, and Thrust finally understood that the "you" in those comments may not have been entirely hypothetical. "You understand." Thrust didn't used to understand the various reasons humans sweat. Biologically, it should have only been a countermeasure to extreme temperatures, and yet apparently happened as a fear response. However, he now knew that if he had paws on any of his polished surfaces, they'd produce a full throttle. I take it you want your candy bar back. "You know damn well how hard it is to get peanuts out you. Give me back my goddamn payday!" End of story. Just a quick shout out to the T5 peeps: Bob the Dragon, Cat Crab Lobster, Data Magnet, Dark Machine, Bezic, Try Again 95, Fudic Yol, Astrea the Dreamer, Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Athilia, Meridian 117, and Jordan Bucksmorm. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.